Rain lashed against the window, the droplets streaking down like ghostly fingers tracing patterns on the glass. Outside, the night was thick with shadows, the city beyond lost in a haze of storm and flickering streetlights. Inside, the only sound breaking the silence was the steady ticking of a clock, each tick echoing like the slow march of something inevitable. Anna lay on her bed, eyes squeezed shut, but sleep refused to come. She turned over, trying to shake off the weight pressing against her chest. But it was no use. The ache was still there, a dull, persistent reminder of a wound that had never truly healed. And then, she was somewhere else. The air around her was dense, heavy, thick with mist that coiled around her ankles like living tendrils. She tried to move, but the fog stretched endlessly in all directions, swallowing sound, swallowing light. Then suddenly, a deafening explosion. The sky split apart as flames engulfed a falling aircraft, the metal skeleton of the plane crumpling as it plunged toward a black abyss below. Sparks scattered in every direction, smoke billowing like a monstrous specter rising from the wreckage. Anna's breath hitched. She couldn't move. She could only watch. And then, amidst the chaos, a figure emerged. He staggered from the ruins, blood staining his torn clothes, his movements sluggish as if he were wading through molasses. His face was pale, bruised, haunted. His lips trembled as he lifted his head and locked eyes with her. Liam. Anna's heart pounded against her ribs. He shouldn't be here. He shouldn't be standing. He was dead. But there he was, reaching for her with bloodied hands, his voice barely more than a whisper. Anna, help me. His voice was broken, fragile, like glass on the verge of shattering. Anna lunged forward. But the closer she got, the further he seemed to drift away. The fog between them thickened, stretching the distance between them like an unseen force was pulling him away from her. And then, a voice. Low, hollow, sinister. He's not dead. Find him. Anna screamed, and woke up. The room was dark, the glow from the streetlights barely illuminating the shadows. Her breath came in ragged gasps, her heart hammering inside her chest. She sat up, pressing a hand against her chest as if to steady herself. Her skin was damp with sweat. It had only been a dream. Only a dream. But it had felt so real. She glanced at the clock, 2:47 a.m. Outside, the rain continued its relentless assault against the city. The occasional blare of a distant car horn cut through the silence. Then, her phone vibrated. Anna flinched. She hesitated before reaching for it, dread curling in her stomach like a living thing. The screen lit up with a message. No sender. No name. Just one chilling line. He's not dead, but if you seek the truth, you will regret it. A shiver ran down her spine. She stared at the message, her fingers tightening around the device. Someone was watching her. Someone knew about her dream. But the worst part was the thought gnawing at the edges of her mind. If Liam wasn't dead, where was he? Morning arrived shrouded in gray, the sky a heavy blanket of clouds that seemed to press down on the city. Anna moved through the motions of her morning routine in a haze, the message from last night still looping in her mind. It had to be a joke, a cruel trick. Because Liam was dead. She had seen the news. The plane crash had been all over the media. There had been no survivors. She had spent nights staring at his empty side of the bed, feeling the ghost of his presence in every corner of their apartment. She had grieved. She had accepted it, hadn't she? She tried to shake the feeling off as she stepped outside, heading for the bus stop. But something was different today. The air felt heavier, charged with an energy she couldn't quite place. And then, hours later, as she was going through the motions of her shift at the restaurant, it happened. A letter arrived. A plain black envelope, left at the front desk. No sender. No return address. Inside, a single note scrawled in uneven handwriting. Come to the restaurant tonight. He will be there. Anna's breath hitched. Her hands clenched around the paper, her pulse racing so fast it felt like her ribs could barely contain it. Who sent this? What kind of sick joke was this? Her mind screamed at her to ignore it, to throw the letter away. But something deep inside her whispered, what if it's true? She didn't know that. Only hours later, everything she thought she knew about Liam's death was about to be shattered. Because when the doors of the restaurant swung open and the VIP guests walked in, Anna's world stopped. Her breath caught in her throat. Because standing there, among them, was Liam. She felt her heart stutter, her blood run cold. It was him. It was him. His face. His stance. His presence. But that was impossible. Then, he looked at her. His eyes met hers. And there was nothing. No recognition. No flicker of familiarity. As if she was just another stranger in the crowd. Her phone vibrated again. With shaking hands, she lifted it to her face. Another message. He doesn't remember you. Don't try. Anna's fingers went numb. Her stomach twisted into a tight knot. What the hell was happening? She had come face to face with the man she buried 3 years ago. But the most terrifying thing was, he looked right through her. The restaurant buzzed with an air of exclusivity, the low hum of conversation mixing with the distant notes of a live piano. The chandeliers overhead cast golden reflections on the polished marble floor, illuminating the wealthy clientele seated in their reserved sections. But for Anna, the world had gone utterly silent. She stood frozen in place, tray clenched so tightly in her fingers that her knuckles turned white. Her lungs refused to expand. Her heart pounded so violently that for a moment, she feared she might collapse right there on the dining floor. Because across the room, seated at one of the VIP tables, was Liam. 3 years ago, she had lost him. 3 years ago, she had cried over an empty casket, knowing there was nothing left of him to bury. 3 years ago, she had walked through the wreckage of her life, convincing herself that she could somehow survive without him. But now he was right there, dressed in an impeccably tailored black suit, his hair neatly styled. He exuded an air of effortless wealth and power. The dim candlelight cast shifting shadows across his sharp features, making the impossible reality of his presence even more surreal. But it wasn't just the way he looked. It was the way he moved, the way he tilted his head when listening, the way his fingers drummed lightly against the table, a subconscious habit she had memorized over years of loving him. It was him. And yet, it wasn't, because he wasn't looking at her. Not with recognition, not with shock, not with anything at all. His gaze passed over her, as if she were just another stranger. Anna's throat tightened. The walls of the restaurant felt like they were closing in, the air too thick, too suffocating. Anna. A voice yanked her back to reality. She blinked, realizing that her manager was staring at her with concern. You okay? You look like you just saw a ghost. Her breath hitched. She had. But instead of answering, she forced herself to move, legs trembling beneath her as she took a step forward. She didn't know what she was doing. She didn't know what she was going to say. All she knew was that she had to get closer. She approached the VIP table cautiously, her hands slick with sweat as she tightened her grip on the tray. The men seated with Liam. No, not Liam. Not Liam. It can't be Liam. Were engaged in quiet conversation, their words lost in the ambient noise of the restaurant. He was listening, nodding, a slight smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. It was a look she knew, a look she had seen countless times before, a look that was so unmistakably Liam that her chest ached. Then, as if sensing her presence, he turned. His eyes met hers. For a single, frozen second, she could have sworn something flickered in them. A pause, a hesitation, a ghost of something familiar. And then, nothing. His gaze remained steady but utterly indifferent, like she was just another server, just another face in the crowd. It felt like the ground beneath her feet had vanished. Sir, she whispered, barely aware that she had spoken. He lifted an eyebrow, his expression politely expectant. Yes. His voice was the same, exactly the same. A tremor ran through her fingers, and she nearly dropped the tray. The men at the table barely noticed her distress. One of them, a broad-shouldered man in his late 40s, barely spared her a glance before looking back at Liam. Daniel, we should discuss the Tokyo project before. Anna stopped breathing. Daniel? No, that wasn't right. That wasn't his name. That was not his name. She took a shaky step forward, the words tumbling from her lips before she could stop them. Liam. The air seemed to shift. For a brief second, something dark flickered across his face. Confusion. Discomfort. And then, just as quickly, it was gone. I'm sorry, he said smoothly, his lips curving into a practiced, distant smile. You must be mistaken. The world tilted. Mistaken? How could she be mistaken? Anna felt the weight of 1,000 memories crash into her all at once. His laugh in the morning, the way his hand used to find hers in the dark, the way he had held her on their wedding night, and whispered promises he swore he'd never break. How could she be mistaken? Her breathing grew unsteady. This wasn't real. This wasn't real. Her hands curled into fists at her sides as she tried to ground herself. She opened her mouth to speak again, to demand an answer, to make him remember. Her phone vibrated, still locked in his unreadable gaze. She reached into the pocket of her apron, pulling it out with fingers that trembled. Another anonymous message. Walk away. He doesn't remember you. He never will. Her stomach twisted violently. A cold sweat broke out across her skin. Her head snapped up to look at him, but he was already turning away, shifting his attention back to the conversation as if she had never been there at all. Like she was nothing. Like she had never meant anything. Anna took a shaky step back. Then another. Her entire body was trembling. She needed air. She needed to get out of there before the walls collapsed on top of her, before the restaurant became a prison, before she screamed. Turning on her heel, she fled. The last thing she heard as she pushed through the kitchen doors was the echo of Daniels' voice, calm and unaffected. Strange girl. Outside, the cold air hit her like a slap. Anna braced herself against the alley wall, her chest heaving. The streets were slick with rain, neon lights from nearby buildings reflecting on the wet pavement. Her heart was still racing. She stared down at the message on her phone, rereading it over and over. Walk away. He doesn't remember you. He never will. Her fingers curled around the device so tightly it was a wonder it didn't. She had two choices. She could do what the message said, walk away, forget what she saw, convince herself that the man in there wasn't Liam. Or she could find out the truth. Anna closed. And then, she wasn't walking away. The rain hadn't stopped. It lashed against the window, filling the apartment with a rhythmic tapping, a relentless reminder of the storm brewing outside, both in the world and inside Anna. She sat at the kitchen table, staring blankly at the cup of tea in front of her. The liquid had long since cooled, untouched, forgotten. Her fingers curled around the ceramic, as if holding on to something solid could keep her from spiraling into the chaos of her thoughts. Tonight had been a nightmare. No, worse than a nightmare. At least nightmares weren't real. Her hands trembled as she reached for her phone, scrolling through her gallery. Photo after photo flashed past, memories of a life that felt like it had been ripped away too soon. Liam's smile, his laughter, his arms wrapped around her on their wedding night. The way he used to look at her, like she was the only thing that mattered. That was real. And yet, tonight, she had looked into his eyes, and there had been nothing. Like he had never known her. Like she was a stranger. Her throat tightened, her vision blurring. Was she losing her mind? Was this all some cruel trick? A sharp vibration snapped her out of her trance. Her phone screen glowed in the dim kitchen light. Envelope with thorough, unknown number. Stop looking. Let him go. A cold chill slithered down her spine. She sat up straighter, grip tightening around the phone. Someone knew. Someone had seen her. Her breath came in shallow bursts as she turned toward the window. Beyond the rain-slicked glass, the city stretched into the distance, bright, bustling, alive. But her gaze landed on the street below. And there, standing under a flickering street lamp, was a figure, dressed in dark clothing, unmoving. Watching, Anna's heart slammed against her ribs. She blinked, and the figure was gone. She sucked in a shaky breath, fingers trembling as she locked her phone. This wasn't just a coincidence. This wasn't just some mistaken identity. Someone didn't want her to find out the truth, which meant she had no choice but to keep digging. The smell of old paper and ink filled the air as Anna sat hunched over a stack of files, flipping through page after page with growing frustration. She had scoured everything related to Liam's plane crash. News articles, government reports, passenger lists. And then, she found it. A single line buried deep within a classified investigation report. The remains of 4 passengers were never recovered. Her heart stopped. For missing, Liam was one of them. Anna's hands tightened around the paper, her breath quickening. The crash had been reported as a complete loss. No survivors, no hope. But if Liam had never been found, then what if? What if he had survived? Her pulse pounded in her ears as she read further. The other 3 missing passengers? No records. No families coming forward. No history. Like they had been erased. A shadow loomed over her. Anna froze. Slowly she looked up and saw a man standing across the table. Tall, well-dressed, unreadable expression. Miss Caldwell, he said smoothly. Her stomach twisted. He knew her name. You shouldn't be here. Anna's fingers curled around the document in front of her. Who are you? His lips twitched, like he found the question amusing. That's not important. He leaned down, lowering his voice. What's important is that you stop looking. A shiver ran down her spine. I don't know what you're talking about. His hand shot out, pressing flat against the file she had been reading. His voice was calm, but there was steel beneath it. You need to let this go. For a moment, all Anna could hear was the steady drip of rain outside. Then, with slow deliberation, the man slid something across the table toward her. A folded piece of paper. She hesitated, heart hammering. Then, without another word, the man turned and walked away, disappearing down the aisle of records. Anna's pulse roared in her ears as she unfolded the note. Only 4 words were scrawled across the page. Hotel Lancaster. Room 607. The hallway stretched before her, silent and empty. Anna's grip on the stolen key card tightened as she stopped in front of room 607. This was insane. She should walk away. She should pretend she never saw that message. But she knew, asterisk asterisk deep in her bones, asterisk asterisk that the answer was behind this door. Taking a deep breath, she swiped the keycard. A soft click. The lock released. The door creaked open. Anna stepped inside. The room was dark, curtains drawn tight. She could just barely make out the expensive furniture, the untouched champagne on the table. And then, a sound. Soft, barely audible. Her breath caught. Someone was here. She turned her head and froze. A figure stood near the window, his back to her. Tall, familiar, dressed in an unbuttoned white dress shirt, his sleeves rolled up. A glass of whiskey dangled from his fingers. The air in the room felt suffocating. Her lips parted. The man turned. Liam. No, Daniel. He faced her fully now, his sharp blue eyes catching the dim light. But this time, he wasn't indifferent. This time, he looked at her. Like he recognized her. Like he knew. 1,000 words fought to rise in her throat, but all she could do was stare. He took a slow step forward, tilting his head as he studied her. Anna, he murmured. Her knees nearly buckled. He remembered. But before she could move, before she could say anything, he smiled. A slow, knowing, dangerous smile. And whispered, You shouldn't have come. Anna's breath hitched. Liam, Daniel, stood just a few feet away, his gaze locked onto her like he was seeing her for the first time. Except he wasn't. He knew her. She could see it in the flicker of recognition in his eyes, the way his jaw clenched, the way his fingers subtly tightened around the glass of whiskey he held. And yet, the way he was looking at her wasn't the way a husband looked at his wife. It was calculated, controlled, like he was waiting to see what she would do next. Anna forced herself to breathe. Her heart was a wild drum in her chest, her fingers curled into fists to keep them from shaking. Finally, she spoke. Liam. A silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. Then, ever so slowly, he smiled. Is that who I am? The air in the room turned razor sharp. Anna felt her stomach drop. What the hell does that mean? Liam, Daniel, whatever he was, tilted his head slightly, watching her with amusement. You came all this way, he mused, voice smooth, casual. And you don't even know what you're looking for, do you? Anna's throat tightened. She had imagined this moment so many times. She had imagined Liam seeing her and remembering, dropping everything, running to her, pulling her into his arms and telling her that he had fought to come back. But this man, this wasn't her Liam. This was someone else. I watched you die, she whispered. His expression didn't change. I buried you. A flicker of something passed through his eyes, too fast to catch. Anna swallowed, her voice barely steady. So tell me, if you're not dead, then what are you? Liam took a step toward her. She took a step back. The corner of his mouth twitched. You want the truth? He murmured. Anna's pulse pounded. Yes. Another step forward. His voice dropped lower. No, you don't. Anna's fingers twitched at her sides. She should leave. Every instinct in her body screamed run. But she was trapped. Not by the room. By him. By his presence. By the fact that the man she loved was standing in front of her, but wasn't him anymore. She sucked in a sharp breath. You're lying. Liam smirked. Am I? Anna took a step closer this time, daring him to move back. He didn't. Instead, he watched her with that same detached amusement, like he was playing a game only he knew the rules to. You call me by my name, she said, voice tight. His smirk didn't falter. So So you remember. Silence. A muscle in his jaw twitched. Anna's heart clenched. You remember me, Liam. And for the first time since she had entered this room, since she had seen him again, his expression slipped. Just for a second. But she saw it. The hesitation. The war in his eyes. Anna's stomach twisted. Who did this to you? She whispered. His fingers tensed around the whiskey glass. Then he laughed. Soft. Dark. And when he met her gaze again, that flicker of familiarity was gone. There's nothing to remember, he said. Anna shook her head. That's not true. You're wasting your time. I don't believe you. Liam, Daniel, sighed, tilting his head. And then he said something that made the blood in her veins turn to ice. Then why don't I remember our wedding night? Anna stilled. He leaned in slightly, voice impossibly smooth. Why don't I remember the first time I kissed you? Her breath caught. Why don't I remember saying, I love you? Her chest ached. Because he was lying. But also, because there was a part of him that believed it. Anna's hands curled into fists. Liam, she whispered, voice shaking. What did they do to you? A shadow passed through his gaze. And this time, he didn't answer. Anna clenched her jaw. She wasn't leaving without answers. And if he wouldn't give them willingly, then she would find them herself. Her eyes darted around the room. The expensive furniture, the untouched bed, the pristine suitcases. Then she spotted it. A file, half hidden beneath a pile of neatly stacked papers on the desk. Liam saw the shift in her gaze. His smile vanished. Anna lunged. She grabbed the file before he could stop her, flipping it open. Her stomach dropped. Inside were documents. Records. Photos. Of him. Not as Liam Caldwell. Not as Daniel Carter. But as someone else. A name she had never seen before, but his face stared back at her. Every picture was recent. Taken over the past 3 years. All with different identities. Her hands shook. They've been, she choked, unable to finish. They've been moving him. Erasing him. Her chest tightened as she flipped through page after page. And then, she found a list. Her eyes scanned the names. 4. For missing passengers. The same one she had found in the archives. Her pulse pounded. It wasn't just him. It was them. They hadn't died in that crash. They had been taken. Her breathing turned ragged. Liam stood motionless behind her. And when she turned to face him, for the first time, she saw something crack in his expression. Fear. Pain. Guilt. You knew? Her voice was barely above a whisper. Liam exhaled. And then, finally, he spoke. I tried to find you, Anna. The world stopped. The walls around her blurred. Her heart broke. Because this was the truth. And it was only the beginning. Anna's breath came in shallow, uneven bursts. She felt like she was standing at the edge of a cliff, staring into an abyss too deep to comprehend. I tried to find you, Anna. The words still echoed in her skull, twisting, unraveling everything she thought she knew. She didn't even realize her hands were shaking until she felt the papers slip from her grip, scattering across the floor. Liam, Daniel, stood across from her, watching her, watching the way her world was breaking apart in real time. For the first time since she had walked into this room, there was no amusement in his expression, no smirk, no mask of indifference. Just something raw, something real. Anna swallowed hard. You, she started, voice hoarse. You tried to find me? He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. No. She stepped forward, closing the distance between them. No, you don't get to say that, and then stop talking. I buried you, Liam. I spent 3 years trying to figure out how to live without you. And you're telling me now that, what? You were out there looking for me. His jaw tightened. That's not how it works. Her heart pounded. Then tell me how it works. Silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating. Anna clenched her fists. You remember me, she said. I know you do. I saw it. I saw it in your eyes. You know me. Liam let out a quiet breath. Then, finally, he nodded. A cold shiver ran down her spine. She had wanted this. She had needed this confirmation. But now that she had it, she wasn't sure she was ready for what came next. Liam turned away from her, moving toward the window. His shoulders were tense, his hands shoved into his pockets as he stared at the city lights below. Anna didn't move. She waited. And after what felt like an eternity, he spoke. They took me. Her stomach twisted. Liam's voice was quieter now, almost like he was talking to himself. The crash, he shook his head. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't random. They staged it. Anna's breath hitched. They, she echoed. He let out a bitter laugh. I don't even know who they are. Government. A private organization. Something bigger. But they had a list. I was on it. Anna felt the room tilt. You're saying they faked your death? I'm saying they made sure no one would ever come looking for me. Anna's stomach clenched. But why? Liam turned back to face her. His expression was unreadable, but his voice was steady when he said, because I was useful to them. Something cold slithered down Anna's spine. What do you mean? I mean, he said carefully, they didn't just take me. He gestured toward the documents still lying on the floor. They took all of us. Anna's breath stalled. The 4 missing passengers. They had never died. They had been taken. For something. For what? Anna moved before she realized what she was doing. She grabbed his wrist. The touch sent an electric jolt through her, a flood of memories and warmth and heartbreak all tangled together. Liam stiffened beneath her grip. She looked up at him, pleading. What did they do to you? For a moment, he didn't answer. Then, slowly, he raised his other hand and pressed 2 fingers to his temple. They rewrote me, he murmured. Anna's stomach twisted. She stared at him, her grip tightening. You're lying. His expression was calm. I wish I was. Something inside her snapped. She shoved him, hard, her voice rising. You can't just say that like it's nothing. You remember me, Liam. You know me. You know us. So don't stand there and tell me they. She choked on the words. Because the truth was right in front of her. The way he flinched when she pushed him. The way his eyes darkened when she said his name. The way he looked at her like he wanted to say 1,000 things, but couldn't. Something inside of him was still there. But something else was blocking it. Anna swallowed back the lump in her throat. How much do you remember? She whispered. Liam exhaled. Fragments. The single word nearly broke her. I remember, he hesitated. I remember your voice. Anna sucked in a sharp breath. I remember the way you used to laugh. Her fingers dug into his wrist. I remember, he exhaled shakily. I remember loving you. Anna felt her knees go weak. But then, the warmth in his gaze flickered. And he added, voice colder this time. But I don't remember why. Anna froze. Her grip slackened. Liam slowly pulled away. They erased the details, he said quietly. They left the feeling, but not the memories. Her hands trembled. She wanted to scream. Wanted to shake him. To demand he fight harder. To remember more. But how could he, when someone had gone so far to take it from him? Her throat tightened. How do we get it back? Liam didn't answer. Instead, he glanced toward the window, his body suddenly rigid. Anna followed his gaze, and her blood ran cold. A black SUV was parked across the street, engine running. The silhouette of a man stood just beyond the glow of a street lamp, speaking into an earpiece. Liam's expression darkened. They found us. Anna's stomach flipped. Who? Liam grabbed her arm. We have to go? Now. The urgency in his voice sent a bolt of adrenaline through her. Wait. Liam, what's happening? He was already moving, shoving open a side drawer, grabbing a gun. Anna's eyes widened. He turned back to her, his grip firm on her wrist. I don't have time to explain, he said, voice sharp. But if we stay here, they're going to take me again. Anna's pulse pounded. Again. She would not lose him again. She nodded. Liam exhaled in relief. And then, in a single, fluid motion, he pulled her toward the fire escape. Behind them, the door burst open. Men in black suits flooded into the room. Anna didn't look back. She followed Liam into the storm. And just like that, they were running for their lives. The cold metal of the fire escape burned against Anna's palms as she scrambled down the ladder, rain pelting against her skin in sharp, relentless drops. The city stretched below, a maze of slick pavement, flickering streetlights, and distant sirens. Above her, Liam moved with terrifying precision, his grip steady, his gaze scanning the streets as though he knew exactly what he was looking for. Gunshots rang out. Anna gasped, instinctively ducking as the window behind them shattered. They're shooting at us, she choked out, breathless. Not us. Liam's voice was eerily calm. Me. Her stomach twisted. They wanted him, and they didn't care who got in the way. Liam reached the bottom of the fire escape first, grabbing her wrist and yanking her down the last few steps. They hit the pavement, their feet splashing through puddles as they sprinted down the alley. Behind them, the black SUVs screeched onto the curb. Footsteps thundered after them. Liam didn't slow down. Anna's heart pounded against her ribs as she struggled to keep up. Where the hell are we going? We need to disappear. Disappear. Like he had been forced to, 3 years ago. She swallowed back fear and kept running, The door slammed shut behind them. Anna braced herself against the peeling wallpaper, chest heaving. The room was dark, barely lit by the flickering neon sign from the convenience store across the street. Dust floated in the air, the scent of old wood and damp plaster wrapping around them like a ghost of something long forgotten. Liam stood by the window, his back tense as he watched the street below. His shirt was soaked through, strands of dark hair clinging to his forehead. For the first time since they started running, he looked tired. Not just physically, exhausted in a way that went deeper. Anna swallowed hard. Are they still out there? He didn't answer right away. Then, finally, they won't stop. His voice was low, steady, final. Anna's fingers curled into fists. So what do we do? Liam turned to her, his gaze unreadable. I should have never let you get involved. Anna's chest burned. Too late, she whispered. Silence. Then, something in him cracked. He let out a sharp breath, running a hand over his face before leaning back against the wall. I don't know who to trust, he admitted. The words were soft, almost like a confession. Anna's heart clenched. You can trust me. Liam met her eyes, and for the first time since this nightmare began, he looked like he wanted to believe her. Anna sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by files. The stolen documents from Liam's hotel room lay scattered around them, half-soaked from the rain. She scanned each one, her mind racing. This isn't just about you, she murmured. Liam looked up from where he sat, rolling his injured wrist. What? Anna turned the page toward him. Look at these names. These aren't random identities. These are high-profile people. Scientists, engineers, intelligence operatives. Liam's jaw tightened. These people weren't just on that flight, Anna continued, heart pounding. They were chosen. Silence. Then, chosen for what? Anna shook her head. I don't know. But they were getting close. Too close. Because the moment the words left her lips, the lights in the building cut out. The air went still. Anna's pulse spiked. Liam was on his feet in an instant, pressing a hand over her mouth to silence the gasp that nearly escaped. Through the thin walls, the sound of boots echoed in the stairwell. They had been found. Liam moved fast. He yanked Anna up, pulling her toward the back exit, just as the first door downstairs burst open. A flashlight beam sliced through the darkness. Voices. Low. Sharp. They're here. Anna's stomach twisted. No. 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 Not again. Not after she just found him. Liam pressed her against the wall, so close she could feel his heartbeat against her shoulder. Do exactly what I say, he murmured, voice barely audible. No matter what happens. Anna nodded. Then, the first gunshot rang out, and everything exploded into chaos. Liam dragged her into the alleyway, just as another gunshot tore through the night. Anna hit the ground hard, scraping her palms as they stumbled forward. We can't keep running like this, she gasped. Liam scanned the street. Then, suddenly, his eyes locked onto something. A motorcycle. Parked. Engine still warm. He turned back to her. Can you ride? Anna blinked. What? Liam grinned. Guess we'll find out. Before she could protest, he grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the bike. He swung onto the seat, revving the engine. And with a sharp kick of the pedal, they were gone. Bullets whizzed past them as the bike shot forward. Anna clung to Liam's waist as they weaved through the narrow streets, tires skidding against wet pavement. The city blurred around them. The past blurred with it. Because for the first time in 3 years, Liam was alive, and she would not lose him again. The rain had turned the streets into a maze of slick reflections, neon lights from the city blurring into endless pools of color as the motorcycle tore through the night. Anna's arms were wrapped tightly around Liam's waist, her heart hammering as the wind whipped against her skin. Every muscle in her body screamed at her to hold on, to not let go. Behind them, the black SUVs gained speed. Tires screeched against wet pavement, headlights slicing through the darkness like hungry eyes. And then, a gunshot. Anna flinched as a bullet shattered the side mirror, the impact sending shards of glass flying. Liam barely reacted. He leaned forward, gripping the handlebars tighter, eyes locked on the road ahead. Liam, Anna gasped. Hold on. The bike swerved hard, cutting into a narrow alleyway. The SUVs followed. Another gunshot. Anna ducked, pressing herself against Liam's back, her fingers digging into his soaked shirt. They weren't getting away. Not like this. Liam cursed under his breath, scanning their surroundings as they sped through the labyrinth of alleyways. Then, his gaze locked onto something. A construction site. Steel beams. Unfinished scaffolding. And just beyond it, a sharp drop leading to the docks. Liam made a split-second decision. He twisted the handlebars, angling toward the scaffolding. Anna's stomach dropped. Liam. The bike launched upward, hitting the incline of a half-finished bridge. For a single, breathless second, they were airborne. Anna's pulse froze. The world blurred into nothing but rain and rushing wind. And then, the bike hit the other side. Tires screeched as Liam struggled to regain control, the impact rattling through their bones. But they made it. The SUVs didn't. Anna twisted her head just in time to see the lead vehicle slam into the edge of the unfinished road, its front end tilting dangerously over the ledge. The driver yanked the wheel, too late. With a sickening crunch of metal, the SUV plummeted, straight into the dockyard below. Anna sucked in a sharp breath, her grip still ironclad around Liam. They had escaped. For now, the motorcycle rumbled to a stop, its tires crunching over gravel. Anna exhaled shakily as Liam killed the engine, the sudden silence almost deafening after the chaos of the chase. They were in an abandoned train yard, hidden beneath the cover of rusting freight cars and overgrown tracks. Anna slid off the bike, her legs trembling. She turned to Liam. "What the hell was that?" she whispered, voice raw. "Who the hell are these people?" Liam ran a hand through his rain-soaked hair, his chest rising and falling with every heavy breath. "They're the same people who took me." Anna's jaw clenched. "And they want to take you again?" Liam's gaze darkened. "They don't leave loose ends." A chill ran through her. She wrapped her arms around herself, the cold finally catching up to her. "So what do we do now?" Liam was silent for a moment. "Then, we find them first." Anna sat on the edge of a wooden crate, watching as Liam rummaged through a worn-out duffel bag he had hidden here, his emergency stash. Inside were clothes, cash, weapons. But her focus was on the files. Liam pulled out a single weathered folder, flipping it open with practiced precision. Anna inched closer. "What is that?" Liam didn't answer immediately. Then, he turned the folder toward her. Inside was a photo, black and white, slightly crumpled. A man in a suit. Cold, emotionless eyes. A name was printed beneath it. Dr. Everett Langley. Anna frowned. "Who is he?" Liam's expression was unreadable. "The man who erased me." Anna's chest tightened. "This guy? He's the reason you don't remember?" Liam's jaw clenched. "Not just me. The others, too." Anna's hands curled into fists. "He's still out there, isn't he?" Liam met her gaze and nodded at a dimly lit control room. Screens flickered with live satellite feeds, images of the city, tracking them. In the center of the room, a man sat behind a polished desk, fingers steepled beneath his chin. Dr. Everett Langley. His gaze was fixed on a single monitor. A grainy image of Liam and Anna in the train yard. Behind him, a soldier in tactical gear shifted. "Sir, they escaped." Langley's expression remained impassive. "Of course they did," he murmured. He leaned back, exhaling slowly. Then, he glanced toward another screen, displaying Liam's old military file. A classified file. "He's remembering faster than I anticipated," Langley mused. The soldier hesitated. "Do you want us to eliminate them?" Langley tapped his fingers against the desk. "No," he said simply. The soldier frowned. "Sir." Langley's lips curved into a dangerous smirk. "Let them come to us." Anna sat across from Liam, staring at the photo of Langley. "So what now?" she asked. Liam's expression was deadly calm. "We find him." Anna swallowed. "And when we do?" Liam's gaze was sharp, focused. "We make him talk." Anna exhaled, her pulse quickening. There was no turning back now, because this time, they were hunting the hunters. The dim light of dawn barely broke through the heavy clouds, casting a gray pallor over the crumbling warehouse. The smell of rust and decay filled the air, mingling with the cold scent of rain that soaked through the worn, makeshift clothes Anna and Liam had scavenged. They had stayed on the move for hours, dodging patrols, slipping through alleyways. But now, they had to make their next move. The folder containing Dr. Langley's name was still clutched tightly in Anna's hand. She stared down at the photo, the man who had erased her life. Liam stood across the room, the flickering light from an old bulb casting shadows over his tense features. His jaw was clenched, his eyes scanning the entrance of the warehouse, alert, calculating. "They're coming," Anna whispered, her throat tight. He didn't turn to her. "We know where they are now," Liam said, his voice low and steady. We have to strike first. Anna's heart hammered in her chest. It wasn't just Langley anymore. They had become targets, enemies of the state. But this time, they would no longer be running. Anna's pulse quickened as she approached him, setting the folder down on the crate between them. What's the plan? Liam looked up at her, his face set in stone. We go after the heart of their operation. Langley's not just some scientist, he said. He's the one pulling the strings, the one who made sure we were erased. Anna's throat tightened. And then what? Then, Liam's lips curled into a grim smile. We make sure he never hurts anyone again. Liam and Anna met their contact in an abandoned underground parking garage. The air was thick with tension. They had to be careful. No one could know where they were meeting. No one could know they were still alive. A man emerged from the shadows, his face obscured by a hood. You came. Liam stepped forward, eyeing the man. We need information. The stranger nodded. I have it. But it's dangerous. Langley has eyes everywhere, and his people, he paused, his voice dropping to a whisper. They've been watching you. They know you're alive. Anna's stomach twisted. How do you know this? She demanded. The man met her eyes, his gaze cold and knowing. I was one of them. Liam's brow furrowed. One of Langley's people? The man nodded. But I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't live with it. He reached into his jacket, pulling out a small device and handing it to Liam. This will help you find Langley, the man said. It's a tracking chip, used to monitor his movements, the locations of the people he's working with. But you have to move fast. He's always one step ahead. Liam took the chip, his gaze hard. We don't have much time. You never do, the man said with a twisted smile. But this is your chance to stop him. And after this, you'll either be dead or free. Choose carefully. Without another word, the man disappeared back into the shadows, leaving Liam and Anna standing alone in the silence. Liam turned to Anna, his expression set. We don't have time to waste. She nodded, her heart pounding. Back at their makeshift safe house, Liam worked quickly, connecting the tracking chip to an encrypted laptop. Anna paced nearby, her mind racing. The plan was in motion. There was no turning back now. The screen flickered to life, a map of the city appearing before them, with a blinking red indicating Langley's last known location. Let's go, Liam said, snapping the laptop shut. Anna swallowed, her throat dry. You said we're going after the heart of their operation, right? This is it. Liam met her gaze, his eyes dark with determination. This is where it all started. Langley's headquarters. If we take this out, we cut off the head of the snake. But Anna couldn't shake the feeling that there was something they weren't seeing, something they weren't prepared for. She stepped closer to him. What if it's a trap? Liam's lips curled into a small, cold smile. It's always a trap. The building loomed in front of them, tall, modern, and guarded. They had reached the heart of the beast. Anna's breath was steady now, the fear from earlier replaced by a fierce resolve. Liam led the way, his movements precise, calculated. They were entering the lion's den, and they had to be silent, swift. They slipped through the back door, bypassing the security systems with ease, thanks to the information from their underground contact. Inside, the halls were sterile, clinical. Cold lights flickered overhead, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Anna's pulse quickened as they moved deeper into the building. Liam stopped suddenly, holding up a hand. A figure appeared at the end of the corridor, a man in a lab coat. Anna froze, but Liam stepped forward, keeping his movements calm, controlled. The man glanced up, his eyes widening. Liam. The man's words were cut off as Liam moved swiftly, knocking him out with a single blow. Anna stepped forward, watching as Liam disarmed the man, taking a set of keys from his pocket. We need to move quickly, Liam said, his voice steady. Anna nodded, adrenaline coursing through her veins. They continued down the corridor, the heartbeat of the building growing louder with every step they took. The door at the end of the hall was unlocked. Liam turned the handle, and they entered. Inside, the room was a stark contrast to the cold, sterile halls. This was Langley's domain, his control center. Monitors blinked, data scrolling across multiple screens. And there, in the center of it all, was Dr. Langley himself, his eyes fixed on a screen. Liam's pulse surged as he stepped into the room. Langley, he barked. Langley's head snapped up, eyes narrowing as he saw Liam and Anna. I knew you'd come, Langley said, a twisted smile playing on his lips. But you're too late. The moment Langley spoke, Anna's stomach twisted. She wasn't sure if it was from fear or anger. All she knew was that she was done running. Liam stepped forward, his jaw clenched, his movements tense and calculated. You think it's over? Langley's smile deepened. He didn't move, his eyes cold and predatory. I know you've been looking for me, Liam. I knew you'd come. Anna stepped closer, her heart thumping in her chest, her hands fisted at her sides. We've been chasing shadows, haven't we? She swallowed, voice steady but trembling. But you're the real ghost, aren't you, Langley? The room seemed to grow colder as Langley's eyes flicked to Anna. His gaze was almost pitying. You think you've found all the answers, but you're so far from the truth. Liam tensed beside her. Enough games. Langley leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms, his voice mocking. You've been looking for your husband. You've been fighting for your memories. He turned his eyes to Anna, his expression calculating. But you're still missing the most important piece, Anna. She felt the weight of his words, a sinking feeling settling in her gut. What do you mean? You never once questioned why I erased you, Langley said, his voice lowering to a chilling whisper. You never wondered why you were chosen. Liam's head snapped to Langley, fury in his eyes. Stop it. Langley's smile grew wider. You don't remember, do you, Liam? Anna's heart skipped a beat. She turned to Liam, confused. What's he talking about? Liam didn't answer. He didn't even look at her. His gaze was fixed on Langley, his entire body taut with tension. Langley's eyes glittered with malicious satisfaction as he leaned forward. You think you're the victim? You think the memories I took from you, he laughed softly, were the worst part? No, Liam. You're not the victim. You're the weapon. The weight of his words hit Anna like a punch to the stomach. Her breath caught, but she couldn't look away from Liam. Liam's face turned pale. No, that's not possible. Langley's smile was sharp. Oh, but it is. He stood, pacing slowly, his steps echoing in the silence of the room. You were never supposed to remember. You were never supposed to know the truth. Anna's heart raced. She looked between Langley and Liam, her voice cracking. What are you talking about? What did you do to him? Langley's eyes gleamed. He was part of an experiment. A project meant to create the perfect soldier. The perfect weapon. Liam's breathing quickened, his hands clenching into fists. No, this isn't real. I wasn't part of anything like that. Langley smirked. You don't remember the tests, do you? The training, the conditioning? The mind wipes. They tried to make you forget, Liam. They tried to erase the truth. But we couldn't wipe everything. Anna's mind raced, but she couldn't process the information. It was too much to understand. Liam's voice was raw, filled with pain. I remember the crash. I remember. His eyes closed tightly, as if fighting against the memories. I remember you. Anna's breath caught. Liam, please. Langley looked at them both, eyes full of derision. You think you've been chasing the truth? You haven't even begun to scratch the surface. Liam's hands were shaking, his head spinning with the weight of everything Langley had said. He hadn't known. He hadn't known that everything in his life, the life he thought he had, the memories he clung to, was a lie. Anna reached out to him, her voice quiet but steady. Liam, you're not alone in this. Liam looked at her, his eyes filled with pain. But I was never supposed to be anyone's husband. I wasn't supposed to have memories. I wasn't supposed to feel anything. His words cut through Anna like a blade, but she couldn't let him go now. Not when they were so close. Not when the truth was within their grasp. We are more than what they made us. She gripped his arm tightly, forcing him to meet her eyes. And you are not their weapon. Liam shook his head, his voice hoarse. I don't know who I am anymore. You are Liam. She took a step forward, her heart filled with determination. You are the man I loved, and you will remember. Liam looked at her, his eyes filled with conflict. But for the first time, something flickered there. Hope. Langley's voice cut through the silence. You think you can fix him? You think you can make him forget what he was made to be? Liam turned toward Langley, his voice growing cold. I'm not your project anymore. Langley's expression twisted into a snarl. You think you can walk away from everything I've done to you? I don't have to walk away, Liam said, voice steely, his grip tightening around Anna's hand. Because you're not in control anymore. The room was tense, charged with the electric hum of impending violence. Liam stepped forward, his eyes locked on Langley. You made a mistake when you thought you could control me. Langley's smirk never faltered. You think this is over, Liam? You've only seen the beginning. Suddenly, Alarm lights began to flash. Red, urgent. Liam turned sharply. We have to move, now. But Langley wasn't done. He reached for a button on his desk, slamming it with a cold, deliberate motion. The floor beneath them rumbled, and a hiss of steam filled the room. A door slid open in the back of the room, revealing armed guards emerging from the shadows, weapons drawn. Anna gasped, but Liam moved with lightning speed. He reached into the bag on his waist, pulling out a small, sleek gun, aimed straight at Langley's chest. No more games, Liam said, his voice cold, controlled. Langley's smile faltered for the first time. You're finished, Liam growled, stepping forward, positioning himself between Langley and Anna. Anna's pulse raced, and just as the guards lunged forward, Liam fired. The echo of the shot rang in Anna's ears, but there was no time to think. The guards were still closing in, and the room was filling with chaos. Liam grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the exit. We're not done yet. They dashed down the narrow corridor, their footsteps heavy on the cold concrete floor. Anna's heart pounded as they neared the escape route, but she couldn't help looking back over her shoulder. Langley was still alive. His twisted smile had faded, but his eyes still burned with hatred. You can't hide from me forever, Liam, Langley's voice echoed in the distance. You'll never be free. But Liam didn't turn back. Instead, he squeezed Anna's hand tighter, and they disappeared into the night. The rain came down in sheets, relentless and heavy, as Liam and Anna ran through the wet streets, weaving through narrow alleyways and slipping through the shadows. Every breath felt sharp, every footstep felt like it could be their last. But they didn't stop. Not this time. Behind them, the flashing red and blue lights of emergency vehicles illuminated the darkened streets, cutting through the wet fog. The sound of sirens wailed in the distance, echoing through the empty streets like a warning. They didn't have much time. Liam pulled Anna into another alley, his hand gripping hers tightly. His pulse was steady, his eyes scanning every movement, every corner. He was already thinking ahead. Always thinking. We're almost out, he muttered, his voice low. I can't keep running forever. Anna's heart pounded in her chest. Where are we going? He didn't answer immediately. His jaw tightened as he glanced back toward the street. We find a place to hide, he said quietly. Get off the grid. Let them think we're dead. Anna nodded, but the weight of his words hit her. Dead. They weren't just fighting to survive. They were fighting for their very identity. But she couldn't afford to think about that now. Not when Langley's reach was still so long. Hours later, they arrived at a secluded house on the edge of the city, a place hidden from the world. The air was thick with tension as they stepped inside, Liam quickly locking the door behind them. The house was modest, an old farmhouse tucked away in a clearing surrounded by dense trees. It seemed safe, isolated. But there was no real safety in a world where they were the most wanted fugitives. Anna dropped to the floor, her legs finally giving out. She hadn't realized how exhausted she was until the adrenaline wore off. Liam watched her carefully, but didn't sit. He paced the room, his mind racing. He had to keep moving, keep thinking. Anna caught her breath, trying to steady herself. She looked up at him, meeting his eyes for the first time since the gunshots and the chaos. What now? She asked. Liam paused, his expression unreadable. We wait. Anna shook her head. We can't wait forever, Liam. They're going to keep hunting us. I know, he replied softly. But we need to figure out how to end this. They both knew that Langley wasn't finished. He never would be. Liam looked down at the ground, eyes clouded with frustration. I never wanted this for you. For us. Anna stood up, walking over to him. I didn't ask for this either. But we're in it now. And we'll figure it out, together. Liam's gaze softened, and for a moment, it was as if the world stood still. But the reality of their situation quickly returned. There was no time to slow down. We need to get to the source, Liam said, his voice quiet but fierce. Langley's been covering his tracks, but there's one place he won't expect us to go. Anna frowned. Where? Liam's lips pressed into a thin line. The facility. The one where they train me. It's hidden under a government facility. No one knows it exists. She felt her blood run cold. And you think we can get there? Liam's eyes were sharp, determined. It's the only way to end this. I need to stop him from destroying more lives. I need to stop them. They arrived at the outskirts of the compound under the cover of darkness. The facility was heavily guarded, a massive concrete structure surrounded by high fences, surveillance cameras, and watchtowers. This wasn't just a building. This was a fortress. Anna felt a cold knot form in her stomach as she glanced around. There was no obvious way in, no easy route for a stealthy entrance. "We'll have to be careful," Liam murmured. "If we can get inside, we can shut down the program and stop Langley for good." "How are we getting past security?" Anna asked, scanning the area for any weaknesses. Liam surveyed the compound carefully, his mind working at full speed. "I have an old contact, someone who still works on the inside. I can get us in, but we have to act fast." Anna looked at him. "And after we get in?" Liam's eyes were cold. "We take out the systems. Disable everything. Langley won't be able to hide anymore." The sound of footsteps echoed in the distance, and they quickly ducked into the shadows, waiting for the guard to pass. Liam held up his hand, signaling Anna to stay quiet. Once the coast was clear, they slipped forward, using the cover of darkness and their training to move undetected. Every step they took brought them closer to their goal, but also closer to danger. They finally made it inside. The halls of the facility were cold, eerily silent. The air smelled of chemicals and antiseptic, a far cry from the home they had left behind. Liam moved with purpose, pulling Anna along with him as they navigated the dark corridors, their steps light but fast. The deeper they went, the more the weight of their mission pressed on them. Eventually, they found a secured door, a heavily reinforced hatch leading into the heart of the facility's operations. "This is it," Liam whispered. Anna's throat was tight as they approached. "What now?" Liam stepped forward, pulling a small device from his pocket. "This will hack into their mainframe. It'll disable their security, wipe the systems clean." He placed the device into a terminal next to the door. A soft hum filled the room, the lights flickering briefly as the device worked. Anna's pulse raced. This was the moment. Then, suddenly, the door swung open. The room inside was vast, filled with rows of computers, screens flashing with data. In the center of it all was a massive, glowing console. But standing in front of it, as if waiting for them, was Langley. He wasn't surprised. He was prepared. "Did you really think you could just come in here and destroy everything I've worked for?" Langley's voice was calm, mocking. Liam stepped forward, his voice cold and steady. "You'll never get away with this, Langley." Langley's smile was chilling. "I already have." He reached down, pressing a hidden button on the console. The screens flickered, and the entire room went dark. Then, a voice came over the speakers. "This is the end." The lights flickered, and the entire facility plunged into darkness. Anna's heart raced, her breath shallow as she instinctively reached for Liam's arm. The silence was thick, suffocating. She could feel the adrenaline coursing through her veins, and her senses were heightened, every sound, every movement amplified in the oppressive blackness. "What happened?" she whispered, her voice tight with panic. Liam didn't answer at first. He reached into his jacket, pulling out a small flashlight and flicking it on. The narrow beam of light cut through the darkness, illuminating their surroundings. The walls of the facility were lined with high-tech equipment, but the screens that had once flashed with data were now dead, completely black. Then, they heard footsteps. Heavy, deliberate steps echoing from the corridor behind them. Liam's body stiffened, and his hand instinctively went to the gun at his side. Anna's pulse quickened. She knew what was coming. "Get ready," Liam said under his breath, his voice a low growl. "This is it." The sound of footsteps grew louder, and then, Langley's voice, smooth and cold, filled the air. "You think you've won?" Liam's grip tightened on the flashlight. "Where are you, Langley?" Langley's laugh echoed through the facility, disembodied, coming from every direction. "I've already won. You've walked right into my trap, Liam. I knew you would." Anna's breath caught in her throat. "What do you mean?" Langley's cold, calculating voice responded. "This place was never about you or your little game of revenge. It was about control. It's always been about control." The walls began to hum, and suddenly, lights flickered back on, revealing the cold, metallic walls of the facility. The hum intensified, and the air grew thick with static, the ground beneath them vibrating slightly. Liam's eyes darted around. "What is that?" Langley's voice came over the speakers again. "That's the signal." Anna's chest tightened. "What signal?" "You've been part of my plan from the start. From the moment you stepped into my world," Langley replied, his voice cold and calculating. "And now, my final experiment is complete." The ground vibrated again, stronger this time. A low, almost mechanical hum began to fill the space, growing louder by the second. Liam's eyes widened as he looked around, trying to make sense of what was happening. No, this isn't what I think it is. Anna's voice trembled with fear. Liam, what's going on? Liam's eyes locked with hers, filled with dread. Langley's going to activate the self-destruct sequence. This entire facility, everything, will be destroyed. Anna's stomach churned. How do we stop it? But before Liam could answer, Langley's voice boomed across the room. You can't stop it. The timer is already counting down. In less than 1 hour, this facility will be wiped off the face of the earth. And with it, all of your precious memories, your precious truth. Liam looked at Anna, his face hardening. We have to find the core systems. If we can reach the control room, we might be able to override the system. Anna's pulse raced. But we don't have much time. Liam pulled her close, urgency in his movements. We can make it. We will make it. But in the back of his mind, Liam knew something. This was no ordinary self-destruct. Langley had set this in motion years ago. He had always known Liam would come for him. He had always known they'd uncover the truth. But he'd planned for that, too. The door to the control room was heavily reinforced, but Liam kicked it in, his body coiled with tension. Inside, the screens lit up as they entered, and Anna saw what she feared, the countdown. 45 minutes remaining. The numbers flashed on every monitor, the red digits ticking down toward their inevitable end. Liam scanned the room, his hands working furiously. I can't stop the countdown without the master code. Anna glanced at him, her eyes wide. Can you get the code? Liam's voice was tight. I need to find Langley's master terminal. It's somewhere here, hidden. I need to locate it. He turned to the screens, hacking into the system with the tools they'd acquired. The lights flickered again, signaling Langley's control over the building. The system was fighting back. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from behind them. Langley's voice returned. You really thought you could stop me? Langley taunted. This is bigger than you, Liam. Bigger than both of you. Liam turned sharply, pulling Anna behind him. Stay close. But Langley's figure appeared on a monitor, a smirk curling on his lips. He wasn't just watching them. He was waiting for them. Tell me, Liam, Langley said slowly, his voice chilling. How does it feel knowing you've been part of a game from the very beginning? Anna's heart raced as she looked at Liam, his expression darkening. You made me your weapon, Liam said coldly. But you never understood one thing. Langley raised an eyebrow. And what's that? Liam's voice was low, filled with finality. I'm not your weapon anymore. Suddenly, Liam lunged at the console, his hands moving with speed and precision as he overrode Langley's system. The countdown paused. For a brief moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Langley's eyes narrowed. You think you've won? Liam turned to Anna, his voice steady but urgent. I can stop the countdown, but only if I have access to the main core. Anna's heart raced. How do we do that? Liam looked at her, his gaze softening for a moment. You stay here. Hold off Langley. I'll be back. She grabbed his arm, her voice desperate. Liam, no. But he only nodded. I'm not leaving you, Anna. I won't leave you again. The ground beneath them shook violently, and the countdown resumed. 30 minutes. We're out of time, Liam said, pulling her close. I need you to trust me. Anna nodded, tears welling in her eyes as she took his hand. I'm not leaving without you, Liam. He kissed her forehead, his eyes never leaving hers. Then stay with me, Anna. Stay until the very end. The lights flickered erratically as the room hummed with the buzz of imminent destruction. The timer loomed large on the screen in front of them, its red digits relentlessly ticking down. The air was thick with tension, the countdown almost deafening. Anna's hands trembled as she stood beside Liam, their bodies tense with the weight of the decision. She could feel the intensity of the moment pressing against her chest, suffocating her. 25 minutes. Langley's voice came over the speakers again, smooth and venomous. You can't stop this, Liam. You should have stayed away. Now you'll be nothing but a memory, just like the rest of. Liam's jaw tightened, his gaze fixed on the terminal in front of him, hands flying over the controls. The sound of the count. I'm not letting you win, Langley, Liam muttered, voice low but filled with conviction. Anna grabbed his arm, her grip tight and desperate. We can do this, Liam. We have to do this. His eyes softened briefly, but he didn't have time to respond. The room shook violently again, sending them both stumbling for a second as the hum in the walls grew louder. The facility was unstable, and every second they spent here meant they were closer to being buried in the rubble. "We need to find the course system," Liam said, urgency coloring his voice. He moved quickly, his steps quick but precise, as though he had done this before, because he had. This wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about ending it all. Liam and Anna moved swiftly through the facility, making their way toward the heart of Langley's operation, where the core systems were located. The path was familiar to Liam, but that didn't make it any easier. The walls around them pulsed with the incessant hum of the countdown, a grim reminder that time was rapidly slipping away. "You won't make it in time," Langley's voice crackled over the speakers again, mocking them. "We'll see about that," Liam muttered, his eyes narrowing as they reached the vault door. The heavy steel door was reinforced, a final barrier before they reached Langley's system. It was locked, but Liam didn't hesitate. He pulled out a device from his bag and swiftly began to work. Anna stood by, scanning the corridor behind them. Her eyes darted toward the darkened hall, every shadow feeling like a potential threat. She could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on her. This was the last chance. A loud click echoed in the room as the vault door finally gave way. Liam pushed it open. Inside, the heart of Langley's empire awaited them. The room was vast, filled with rows of high-tech systems, glowing monitors, and flashing lights. Everything was connected to the central core. This was where everything had been controlled, where the past 3 years of their lives had been manipulated. Liam stepped into the room, his face set with determination. "We end this here." But as they entered the control center, they immediately realized they weren't alone. The room wasn't empty. Langley stood at the far end of the control room, a twisted grin on his face. He wasn't alone either. His private security had been waiting. Liam's hand instinctively went to his gun, but Anna grabbed his wrist. "No, Liam. Don't." Langley's voice was taunting, sickly sweet. "You think you're the first to try and destroy everything I've built? You think you're the first to attempt this? You're too late." Liam's gaze hardened. "This ends now, Langley." Langley's grin didn't falter. "You still don't understand, do you? It was never about you. It was about control. You were always part of the plan, Liam. You were the weapon, the perfect soldier." Liam's breath hitched, his hand tightening around the gun. But Anna's voice stopped him, soft but filled with resolve. "No, you're not a weapon. You're more than that. And I won't let him turn you into something you're not." Langley scoffed, his eyes narrowing. "How touching. But it's too late for that." He gestured toward the control panel. "The countdown is already set. It will all be over soon." The countdown on the screen read, 10 minutes remaining. Anna felt her stomach drop. Liam and Langley stood facing each other, two sides of the same coin, each one fighting for control over the life they had fought to rebuild. "You can't win," Langley said, his voice a low whisper, as if trying to plant doubt in their minds. Liam's grip on his gun faltered for a second, the weight of Langley's words settling heavily in the room. But Anna was there. She stepped forward, standing beside him, steady and unwavering. "No more lies." Liam's hand tightened around the gun again. He had to make a choice. He turned to Anna, his eyes filled with a storm of emotion. "We can't stop it without destroying everything." She took his hand, feeling the truth in his words. But she knew something else. The truth wasn't just in stopping the countdown. It was about stopping Langley. "You can't destroy what you can't control," Anna said, her voice a whisper. Liam's eyes flicked to her, and for the first time, he let himself believe in them. Langley laughed, his voice echoing through the room. "You're too weak. Too late." Liam's eyes hardened. "We're never too late." He pulled the trigger. Langley collapsed, a bullet wound in his chest. His last words, barely a whisper, were lost in the static as his body hit the ground. Liam didn't look back. He rushed to the console, his hands flying over the system, overriding the final commands. The countdown on the screen stopped. 5 minutes. The room fell into utter silence. Anna exhaled, her heart still racing. She stood beside him, looking at the screen in disbelief. Liam turned to her, his expression softening. "We did it." Anna shook her head. "Not yet. Not until we make sure this place is truly gone." Liam nodded. "It's not over until it's finished." Together, they began the process of wiping the system clean. Every piece of Langley's empire, every trace of his work, every secret kept in the darkness. It was all being erased. The world outside was still in chaos, but for the first time in years, Anna and Liam could see a future. And in that moment, they were finally free.